What you got there?
Oh, this book, the book I did, I was looking through it real quick for this. I don't know what's going on here. This talk, Dana Plato's Last Breath, I dug it out of. What in the fuck?
Are you being
I'm,
called from beyond the grave?
I. Thanks, Nan. It is. This is what happens. Oh, shut up. This is what happens when you update your phone. Everything goes crazy.
Don't blame the retrograde. Blame your past.
Okay. Yeah, you're right.
Ooh.
As long as I have something to blame, things are going to be okay in my life. I'm
Yes.
joking. Half
Yes.
joke.
And some people may even say that you blaming something is the way you get by financially. Do 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 do.
Me?
Sometimes.
How is that? I don't even get that. What did I blame that I get by financially? What happened?
Oh, no. I think you misunderstood. I meant like the idea of taking someone's life to profit off of. There's a lot of people in the past who have accused you
Oh.
of profiting from such a thing.
Oh yeah, exploitation of. Yes, yeah.
Absolutely. So, this relic from the past seems slightly exploitive at the surface, and if you Google such a thing, most people would say so too.
The Dana Plato's Last Breath book?
Dana Plato's Last Breath book.
And CD with her last breath.
This podcast is based around the history and experiences of the infamous Shane Bugbee, recollected and retold by Shane Bugbee himself. Who is Shane? Well, you're about to find out. I'm your host, Nannerl, and this is Speak of the Devil.
Yeah, that's what a lot of people said, but it's interesting when you make artwork. As an older person, I can say this, but back then I was always confused by people's interpretation of things because I also heard things about the book being a great expose on drug abuse or, child stars and how they were used and abused. So when you present ugly truths, people's interpretation can be all over the place. And as an older artist now, I can say that, and I have to stick with this philosophy and I haven't figured out a way to take responsibility for your interpretation or others. Though I try to understand that concept of how is it my responsibility to take on the burden of every individual's interpretation of what I make or even what I say? Because as a human being, if I said something in an interview 10 years ago, I have the right to change my mind.
Oh, absolutely.
But people will interpret then. Now we have a time people can ask me on Twitter, hey, what did you mean by this 10 years ago? But they don't. They selectively choose these things to run off with their narrative versus just like, we're in a transparent world. Ask me, what do you think? Oh, well, back then I said that, but so the Dana Plato stuff was a true piece of artwork. It was a reflection and an honest, like, art and journalism mixed, where it was what was going on in my life. This was a reflection of what was happening in my life. I can exploit a lot of things. You can be exploitive in a lot of ways, but I don't know if reflecting what's going on in my life is anything more than being very generous and sharing. Yes, I could have been a pornographer and been exploitive. I could have owned a liquor store and been exploitive. I could sell cigarettes and be exploitive of the vices that we all enjoy, or those vices enjoy us. I chose to be generous with my story, and that's how I see the Dana Plato stuff,
Kids, if you don't know who Dana Plato is, there was a show on TV called Different Strokes. It's where this What You Talking About Willis kid comes from, but there also is a wonderful female actress, young actress in it named Dana Plato, who plays his sister Kimberly. She's also in a few sitcoms here and there. I believe she won an award for Exorcist 2 and other things along the way. But she's a child of 70s shows, not our 80s, River Phoenix and Joaquin Phoenix and all these other, Macaulay Culkins and stuff like that. This is 10 years before that. So the idea of a wild child actor or a child actor who burned out or anything like that happening, I feel like, especially being female, was completely unheard of.
Yeah, that's true. That is true. She's the first of that wave. That's for certain. And it was weird that you're right. Like, wow, I didn't think about it generationally because it's hard for me to do that. I'm stuck in my generation, I guess. But, well, how true, because you're right. The ones of the 80s and 90s learned from those mistakes, and they had people watching their investments.
Right, and unfortunately also people either after their money or their kids' ass and stuff, and then you have after that the ones where the parents took the money, like, Macaulay Culkin and other 90s children, and now we have the YouTube generation. We have the hype beasts up against semi-talented quasi-celebrities. So what makes someone celebrated, especially as a young person, has completely changed. It used to be, this kid is on television, famous. This kid is in a movie, famous. But now there's a lot of reasons your child could be famous. And so I think that she took a lot of responsibilities onto her.
Yeah, and when you speak about generational, you think about back then there was 3 channels. So she was our, for me as a young boy, she was like the sexy girl. I don't want to say sexy, but because we're so young, don't even understand what that word is. But she was the young flower where you're looking like, hey, she was everybody's girlfriend.
Yeah.
She was the girl next door and everybody's girlfriend. So you looked at her and as a boy, there's my girl, there's a girlfriend. That could be a girlfriend or something like that. In a romantic, weird way like that. I don't want to say sexy, but certainly.
Not quite Farrah Fawcett kind of thing, right. But rather the girl in class.
Yeah, you're right about Farrah Fawcett. I did have that poster, and you are right. I thought differently about her than Dana. Wow, that's great. And I did have that poster. Oh, my goodness. I'm such a typical Gen Xer.
All right, so Dana Plato's Last Breath book and CD. The cover you showed me was so tabloid looking, whereas like when you look this up on Google now, you see a book that's very college looking, like it's a very plain looking book. And is it the same book?
Well, it's been bootlegged a lot. And
okay.
The college book that I've seen on there, I have nothing to do with. I don't know where that comes from.
Okay, yeah, it's like maroon with the top of it is like cream colored and has the font on it, and not just your name is under this. There's also King Velveeta. Right. And yeah.
You're right. So I had some people help me with the book. Certainly, and I gave them credit. So there was an editor that condensed my writing, and Velveeta did the graphic design. Yes.
Okay.
That was my book. I happened to, back in the day, I was naive and I thought I was cool by giving everyone credit that you paid. Most publishers don't do that. They just have an editor and, it's put out by one author. They don't give everyone credit on the cover. So I'm too nice.
I think that's also sort of a something you do when you're small potatoes, or it's a kind of something you do when you start out kind of thing. You see it a lot on rap music. Everyone gets to get in on the on the track. It's sort of your version, the publisher's version of it.
I love your take on this. I love that, how you see that, because you're right. That is very street. It is very underground. You're right. It's like you got to give credit to the whole crew. The whole crew gets credit. What did he do? He's just part of the crew. Just put his name on there. It's we're all fam.
That's
for
right.
the fam. Right. Oh, I love that.
So the reviews on this, there's only been 8 reviews. And to be honest, the latest one seems to be 2012. And there's a couple from 1999. And it's incredible to me that no one has anyone ever told you what they thought of the book to you? Besides Nancy Grace, maybe.
Yes, I was on Queen Latifah.
Mhm.
Okay, so besides a public one, people personally, yes. When it first happened, I was going in and out of New York for meetings because of this and other opportunities. And I know there was a gentleman who was in love with Dana Plato. He was just in love with so he's like, if you ever get to New York, I want to take you out for dinner. And so him and his friend took us out to this real nice steakhouse, and we visited where John Lennon was shot. All these weird places, went to the Seinfeld diner. But he spent that whole time trying to explain to me the flaws of the book and my lack of compassion and how he felt about it, which was fine with me because he was paying for dinner and taking me out. So I'm going to listen to this guy's opinions on things. But he was kind about it, but it was just something that unnerved him. And as I told him, I meant to unnerve you. This was hard to live through. Fucking Dana Plato's son called me and was like, "Where's my mom?" And I knew she was dead. And I'm like, you have to call your grandmother, young man. It was a hard situation to go through because we had become friends. So the book is going to be unnerving. It was unnerving for me to live through it. It was fucking nuts, surreal, a painful surreal. So I hope the book is a painful thing for people to take in. It's not.
There's a lot of criticism in a couple of these reviews about your responses, and I guess people expect one sort of response to anyone's death, and it is a very interesting criticism because I feel like we face this whenever a celebrity dies. The one person who doesn't cry over it in the, at the lunchroom at work is the one who gets called heartless because they didn't, or people who may or may not have been connected personally to someone will often have the most dramatic overreactions to these deaths because they suddenly remembered they appreciate something. They suddenly remembered they like someone that they didn't even think about until they died. And here, you interviewed someone while they were alive. The fact that they died meant that they were no longer there as your friend, as, someone you spoke to regularly for a while.
Oh yeah. It's interesting how one thing I take from what you just said is people and I'm not a people. I'm an artist. And in this situation, that's my duty, it's the job of the artist. And when we don't even have jobs, it's like the impulse of the artist, I should say. We don't have free will. People think we have free will, but there's an impulse. And when you let that impulse take over your life and you don't pretend to have free will, all kinds of crazy things happen and some honesty happens. And so it was my job to present this in a world before the internet, when people were able to ignore the exploitation of Dana Plato as a child artist. Her decline was used as entertainment, and fodder for tabloid stories. So in a beautiful world, pre-internet, we have this world where the media is presenting beauty and righteousness, and I'm presenting a truth that is ugly. Here, this is the reality of this situation. And, say what you want about me. They continue to ignore the ugly part of the root of this issue. How did this happen? How did no one take care of this person? How was she ignored yet famous? How was she invisible yet seen by everyone? No one wants to take on that subject until, like you were saying, as these things evolved, as these ugly truths continued to come to the surface. Then in the 90s and stuff, like even Macaulay Culkin, he's a millionaire still. He's got money because someone in his and his management team was legally investing for him. You know, he had a fund set up. They were like, listen, we can't let this kid become a drug addict on the streets. We just made $50 million off him. So they felt an obligation even for themselves to not be embarrassed publicly from ugly books like Dana Plato's Last Breath. They're like, yeah, we don't need a Macaulay Culkin's Last Breath. Like, let's invest some money for him. Oh, yeah, the parents are ripping him off left and right. Well, we've got this little bank here set up for him. And so that started after people started presenting these ugly stories, you know, and a lot of that is tabloid culture. Tabloid culture, there is some justice in those ugly truths. So mine was just tabloid culture, I guess you could say.
You didn't have the name National Enquirer or, you know, up to today's standards, it would be TMZ. You didn't have that name on, you were independently releasing something based on a personal contact.
Right, as an artist, not as an exploitive journalist,
Right.
but as a true person who was struggling with putting out zines as a journalist or a writer. I don't know what so I've been called a journalist by the state's attorney of Illinois, and I've been called a scumbag by people too. And it's just like I'm somewhere in between all of that. But I'm definitely wondrous, have a wondrous childlike mind, and I think that's part of an artist quality or something like that, or a brute naivete that I try to retain in my artwork. It's awful getting older because you lose your innocence and your naivete more and more. And so,
Isn't that the truth for her too? I think people didn't want her to grow up. And I think that's far more abusive than having a book based on something told from the horse's mouth.
oh yeah, and you know, it was so wonderful to talk to her. Just honestly, like first, like, yeah, I want to get you naked online. We can, you know, you're looking to make money. I can help you out with that. We'll do a website. And then to talk to her about what her intent was. She's like, she was all fine with that because she was in a desperate situation. But then she starts telling me these stories, and she's saying, I don't want to be Dana Plato anymore. Like my stepmom, Tyler's grandmother, wants to open up a restaurant, call it Dana's Place, and we'll serve like fast food, and I'll be there as the, you know, server. So people can come to the restaurant and meet me, and I'll sit them down. And I'm like, how do you feel about that? And she goes, exhausted thinking about it. I just
It's like
want
an
to be
animal in a zoo.
right. And she's like, I just want to be Tyler's mom. I don't want to be Dana Plato anymore. I just want people to say, hey, there's Tyler's mom. And I want to have a clothesline in the back so I can hang up clothes and let them dry. That's what I always saw mother as, like things like that. Just the mundane of life, cooking cookies, drying clothes on a clothing line. And she was telling me this stuff and making my child hot dogs. And I was like, oh my God. Like, let's go for this story. I was I was interested in her boobies constantly because that was the deal. But I was no longer interested in exploiting her.
I was gonna get her corsage, take her to this makeshift prom.
That's me. You have me. Oh my goodness, you do have me nailed. It is exactly that. There would have been cake involved. But yes, I was looking to date Dana Plato in a prom-like way. You got me, son of a gun. Am I that easy? Oh, Nannerl's got me. 500 years under her belt, of course. There you go. That's me. I definitely fell in love with her, and I said, let's tell this story. Well, then I said, tell me more, because I do a lot of interviews. I love doing interviews. I love learning. So I set up a separate phone line where she could call it anytime that phone rang. I jumped and answered it, and it would record. And oh my goodness, I just loved talking to her. And we became fast friends, you know. Much like me and you, we became fast friends. We just hit it off, and it became it became a real relationship, a real like mutual give and take, like this.
It sounds
this
like kind of a fate or some sort of like she needed to do this before she went kind of thing. Like you were destined to do something.
It definitely felt like something like that. I mean, it was nice to have her on like the Howard Stern show. I don't know if you've heard that interview, but it was like she's on there and Howard's like, who's the Shane guy? And she goes on, Shane's great. He's this great guy. And she just goes on about it. I'm like, oh, this is one of the greatest things in my life. Like, as a young man who may or may not have masturbated to you, I can't even remember at this point. She was definitely in some sort of dream scenario as a young child. And so just to hear her say this, I was like, I am on cloud 9, you know? That was just that was a weekend that was so high and so low because like 48 hours later, she was dead. So that was definitely a surreal weekend, you know, definitely fucking weird. That whole week was insane.
There's a dude here on Amazon who said that they are to blame partially for her death.
Who's they?
And so this person named Ralph Berger, Berger, said that Dana was a beautiful woman who did what she wanted no matter what anyone said. We have to respect that. But the book is shocking to anyone who did not know Dana at all. It makes us all realize the desperation she endured during her life to earn an income. But despite the book, Dana was going to make a very big comeback. I have listened to the CD, and I heard a lot of desperation in her voice, and I felt sorry for her. I have only myself to blame for her death because I didn't pay attention to her situation. But my love for her will always be unconditional. I will keep touch with her son every so often, and he's a very good teenager. God bless Dana. I love her so much.
Ralph, he's the New York guy that took me out to steak.
Is that the guy?
That is.
Because, like, the minute you told me when you started talking about the steak, I felt like, okay, this must be the guy. Nice.
It's your 500-year-old intuition kicking in again. There you go. You were absolutely right. That's the guy.
Posted October 28th, 1999.
And he cared. He took me out and spent 8 hours with me. I think he gave me he paid me even. He's like, here's $300. I want to spend the day with you, take you out to eat, and I want to understand this. So I was like, yeah, that's how it happens. You know, often.
About 1998, 1999, this happened?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, right before that review, I believe.
Quite a chunk of change for an escort to receive in 1998. Good for you, Shane.
Yes, that's right. That's right. I'm a high-priced call boy. No, but that's as artist, you are like a call girl anyway. You have to, you know, like, can I come to your studio and look at some of your artwork? I'm interested in buying. Yes, come on by. You know, you open your door, you go out to dinner with people. This is what happens. Ralph turned out to be a swell fella. You know, he listened and he was really interested. And you're right, that review, he did listen, you know. He was confrontational about it. And I was a little worried he might hurt me. You know, he was with some guy, Bruce, the bus driver, a New York bus driver. And he's driving around in his car all tough, like, I know the streets, you know, he's
driving so angry because his shirt was put on backwards.
Exactly. Yeah. And so I was like, you know, at some point, I got to wonder if these guys are going to pull into an alley and start beating on me. You know, but I put myself in weird situations all the time. And, you know, I have yet to have problems. Knock on plastic.
It's interesting. It's a very fair, as much as the guy only gave you 1-star review, at the same time, he's sort of balanced in his review at the same time. So I guess it's somewhat valid because at least you got $300.
Oh yeah, but do you have a hard time on social media today? Someone's you know, says something sad. It's hard to hit a like button when they're talking about
That's true. That's
war
super
crimes
true.
Or something like that. You agree with it, and I go to hit the like button because I agree with your political statement, but it's really sad.
Yeah, you don't really want to celebrate something like that. So I kind of get it. Kind of like when someone's dog dies and they post about it on Facebook. Are you going to thumbs up just like that? Huh, Grandma?
Right. Yeah, and I think that's how I take Ralph's 1 star. I'm too sad. This book is awful that it exists. And he's right. They're right. I'm with that. It's not a nice book, but I'm sorry, it wasn't a nice situation. It was not a nice situation. I know in the book, like the one thing I, was a little weird about doing, but we did, was I put a letter from her son in there.
Mm-hmm.
And then put the Tyler Lambert Trust Fund. They were collecting money for the kid. And, yeah, it was hard, putting Tyler's letter in there.
Right. And Tyler's no longer with us.
Right.
So unfortunately, Ralph does not contact him anymore, sadly.
Yeah. Well, yeah, he killed himself on the anniversary of his mom's death a couple of years ago.
Were they close?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Oh, yeah. That's why when her death was labeled a suicide, that was one of the angry factors that drove me to put the book out. Now, there's many reasons anyone does things. Seldom is there one reason, even though people will cite one reason. So I have layers of reasons where I put this book out. But that moment where I was like, how could they list this as a suicide? No one's even talked to me. Like, I was the last person to talk with her. How could the police narrow this down to that without any evidence? I don't believe it's a suicide. And I also think listing it as a suicide with her son, like, that's damaging to this child. He should know that his mom loved him, was looking forward to, like, I talked to her. She's like, oh, I can't wait to get home. It's mother. I was her flight because of a tornado had a layover in Dallas. And so, I remember buying her a meal, credit card, buying her meal from the restaurant at the hotel because she didn't have any money on her. And she's like, I got to get home by Mother's Day. And I said, well, the air flights say you're going to take you the next day. She goes, I really hope so. I can't wait to see Tyler for Mother's Day. This is going to be so great. I've missed a couple Mother's Day. So she went on for a while in our conversation that night about seeing Tyler the next day for Mother's Day. Then she ends up dead and they say it's a suicide. There's no fucking way someone's looking forward to seeing their son on Mother's Day and then kills himself. Like, I don't believe so. Maybe a psychiatrist would tell me different. I shouldn't say there's no fucking way. But I most certainly did not hear that. Like, she was really stoked to see her son. And that's what her driving force was. And I know myself, like depression is a very individual experience. But I know for myself, some of the things that have kept me on this earth are things like that, like the love of, I can't leave my family behind. What will they think? What will it make them sad? I've got to be here for them. I've got obligations that are beyond me on this world. Even though I feel like if I didn't have those obligations, I could leave sometimes, like, and so I don't believe she killed herself, and if an addiction was enabled by people giving her Tyler's grandmother, I really believe that she enabled this. And I also have, I suspect the fiance probably over-medicated her, probably gave her Dana was going to leave him. And she told me that night. She's like, he's yelling at me. He's being real abusive. He wants to know where the money is. And I said, hey, Dana, you want to just move up to Chicago when you get home? And she goes, I want to see Tyler I want to go to see. And so she was planning on moving up to me. And I had already rented an apartment above mine for her. So she was going to leave her boyfriend. These are all things that a police officer, if they asked, they would be, I think, skeptical at the very least. Like, there should be an investigation. Because there's motive here now. She was going to leave her boyfriend. So there's a lot of sketchy things involved in this.
It sounds quite narcissistic of the mother-in-law. And it sounds like her son was wrapped around her finger. And it was maybe a case of, the mother-in-law wanting the best for her child. And so she, even though she dislikes this person or sees some sort of, she can't lose this aspiration for this diner or whatever else she can squeeze out of this woman. And so she had to keep the cash cow around. Cash cow can't leave her son. That would mean that it would end for them.
Well, but she was rich.
Okay. So maybe it's just a control thing.
Right. I think See, I like what you're saying there, but she was, wealthy and married to the biggest doctor in Oklahoma and all this. But I think what it was a social thing, like I'm embarrassed of you. You're a drug addict.
Oh, because
Real people,
she comes from old money or like high society, and
yes.
so this is a novo reach tramp or whatever, someone, and you can't have that in your family. Kind of like Diana being offed because she almost married that Egyptian royal dude.
Fucking bingo. That's great. That's exactly. I could not have said it that way, but yeah, that's exactly the typical. Yeah, you've explained it perfectly. That's exactly what I saw. Like I was like, oh, this lady. You've already said it. Yes, it was more societal underpinnings than desperate. Well, I wouldn't say not desperation, but yeah, there was a societal force, a societal illusion that was driving that. Yes. And what you're saying, narcissistic, this is wonderful, especially for this season. That is something I am dealing with. And that is, as I study what a narcissist is and covert narcissism and narcissistic abuse, from the boyfriend to the mother to her ex-husband, Dana Plato was surrounded by extreme fucking narcissists. And it's weird how certain people get attracted to these narcissists and they surround themselves with them and they just chew them up. They're like these psychic vampires, as LaVey might say. Like they're just these people that feed off of weak, but it's not weak, beautiful, sensitive people that seem weak. They feed off that. Sorry to ramble.
Like the only bit of joy that Dana may have had was her son. The rest of it was sucked out of her by these other people.
Yes, that's exactly what I got. That's why when we started talking, it wasn't that I related to her, and therefore I felt her, and therefore I was like, I don't want to, let's do something else besides the nudes. Let's do the story. Because there was something there. There was something more there, that was needing to be told. And, yeah.
And not to virtue signal or anything like that, but isn't that sort of a step above exploiting someone for nudes? So I don't understand how your book is so heavily criticized for exploitation when someone truly evil or exploitative who just wanted to make a buck off of someone, a public figure, would have gone with the nudes.
Oh, right.
Secret boudoir from beyond the grave or whatever.
Oh, I get accused of doing it for the money all the time, and that is exactly it. If I were doing it for the money, I know how to make that. Like, I know exactly what you're saying. And if I've made money at underground gross shit that no one can make money at, I can definitely make money in pornography and lottery tickets and whatever else. Like, I can be an exploitive motherfucker. I think that's just the deal with underground artists and people, street artists and like graffiti artists and hip hop artists and all that. People actually exploit us. And they use us as a soapbox for their politics. The same with like Ice-T when he did Cop Killer. All these Republicans decided to stand on his neck to talk about their bullshit politics, not about the essence of his message and how this is what he sees in his neighborhood. This is what's going on, and he's finally angry enough to write a song called Cop Killer. They want to use it as a soapbox to say, look at these savages. Look at these vile people. And so that's what's used against me, I feel, often as this class issue. Like, who is this guy to publish a book? Obviously, his intent is scumbag, because I'm of a scumbag zip code or whatever. I'm of a zip code that produces gangbangers and bikers and mafiosos or whatever. It's the class issue over and over again, but that's how I see things. That's my bias in life. I always see things as class issues, or people on the margins are always judged differently than people within the margins.
Do you think that half the people who, at least, well, saying it as half sounds dumb, but do you think that a lot of people who criticize your book are secretly jealous that you were allowed to have a friendship with her?
Yeah, I think that is part of a lot of the critiques, not just for this book, but for things I do. Is that people like, this guy's from my? That is part of it. Is a jealousy. I can't be seen as a journalist. I have to be seen as Shane from Plumber Stock, and the rest of the plumbers are like, how dare you have a better life than me? How dare you be a free spirit? I'm caught in this cage. Yeah.
I think that often happens with artists in general as well. When the artist gets to fly out of the cage and, be whatever bird they want to be, the other birds are cooped and they peck each other.
Oh, I love that scenario. It's the same like Ministry in Chicago, this industrial band called Ministry. They made it. Well, I don't know if anyone knows who they are. So, but they made it. They got popular. Smashing Pumpkins, same thing. Band, and so they made it popular here, but they were only loved in Chicago when they were the underdog. When they started to get heat, people in Chicago was like, "Fuck, we're not in the city." The city Chicagoans were like, "I'm not going to see Ministry. Fuck them. They're all popular." And then the suburbanites came in to see Ministry, and they played for so many more people. But the cool city people turned their back because they were no longer our band. They were everyone's band.
I feel like San Jose is like that a little bit. There are so many bands, so many like figures who come from San Jose or like surrounding areas, and they don't go back because they know what they're going to face if they come back famous. So they just stay in LA or New York or wherever they went. And you can't blame them.
No, I don't blame them. I understand it all too well, especially having left Chicago for over a decade. That was a reason. And coming back here, I definitely feel that weird jealousy among certain of what people would say is your peers. I do feel that jealousy among some of them. Some of them are really, really upset that I was named one of the few hipsters. And this is like hipster called like jazz musicians, stuff like that, and this big expose on what a hipster is and the history of hipsters. And I was named that in the Reader, like with really high-end artists, but no one else was amongst my peers. So they all spoke out against it. And now when I see them, I come back, they've got this, "Hello, Shane. Good to see you, Shane." But there's a tone in their voice like
you're the snot-nosed kid that actually graduated and went to grad school and got their degrees, and your old professors still cannot believe that you made it.
Yeah, but I wouldn't call these motherfuckers my professor. They're like the rich kids that went to school with me, and I got the poor kid scholarship. I wrote.
You did okay, and they still work at the dealership with their dad.
Yeah, exactly. I wrote this thing. I forget where I heard it or if I came up with it. It was like, "Only poor boys take a chance." I think it was from a song, but I really liked it because I felt like, people on the margins really take chances in life. Like they're really like, "Fuck it. no one sees me. I'm going to try it. I'm going to go for it." That's where real evolution happens, is the people that are held back in the crab pot, the crab that gets out of that crab pot. That's a beautiful thing.
It's lonely at the top as the crab who grabs out of the crab pot, but at the same time, do you want to go back? Do you want to be surrounded by your shitty friends who are going to pull you back into the pot? Or are you going to pull your way out of the shit and be alone, but at least you succeeded? It's an interesting duality that you have to kind of...
Isn't that so true, what I've been going through lately? Just you putting that into words, I'm like, God, that's my life. Like, coming back to Chicago, I think like, well, I'm getting all depressed, all this life problems I'm dealing with, and it's like, or change of, I don't know, the problems, whatever, change of life. And, oh my God, like thinking I'm just going to give up and drive Lyft and Uber. And I'm like, what the fuck am I doing? Like, I'm going to go back into my hell, keep trying to move, whatever. It's exactly what you say. Do I really want to go back there? No. Why? I guess I could. Like, I'm not putting down Lyft drivers.
No, but not to sound cultish or anything, LaVey didn't go back to being a fry cook when he was
Right.
down in the dumps. You know, think of other people who have survived. They've had downfalls. Steve Jobs had downfalls.
Yes, and even if LaVey went back to being a fry cook, there's nothing wrong with that necessarily, but there's a crime to it, because what a waste of his studies, 30, 40, like I have 35 years in studies in this underground and occult world. What a waste of my talents.
Right, and
go
those
fry-
years of studies were not there back when you were a plumber. So you are a different person than when you started at something entry level, which is probably the most emotionless reason why, if you've come this far, listeners, don't fucking go back to working at Starbucks just because you had to move back to your hometown. You may have hard knocks right now, but we've all gone there before, and it's easier to just push forward. Just see it like having a cold.
Oh, yes. That's beautiful advice. And for me, I'm lucky that I have counseling and to help me see through a lot of things like maybe insecurities or issues that I have as a human being, or, digging out of like a toxic male life that has been thrust upon men. They don't even realize it. They don't even realize the pain of being this toxic male that they're experiencing. It's an awful deal, but then to have to, learn about that stuff through counseling has been wonderful to me. And that I wonder, like depression, all that stuff is real. And I often, at this point in my life, wonder where I would be if I didn't have, first of all, like the counseling of recent, but also like finding good friends like you, like yourself, like just recognizing when we first started talking, I really would like to be friends with this person. They're very smart. I want to know more about them. They have a view of life that I don't know if I have, or I want to learn more about. So I'm glad where I have the choices to choose the people that I want as guides, or are helping guide me and learning from me. Like, so you're a person that I consider one of my guides, or someone we share this. And that to me is a really, I have a choice in who I hang out with. And I've made good choices in that respect. And I also have submitted to going to get counseling and help where that's hard for our toxic ego or things like that to do. So those are the main things that have helped me evolve as a human being.
This sounds incredibly obvious, but what do you think would have happened to Dana Plato had she received counseling?
Oh,
She's
think
kind of before that time.
Yeah, I think she would have been just a wonderful actor. She was a real artist. She was a passionate person into her craft. So she would have studied it mercilessly and been the best she could have been. She was coming to Chicago to be in a play, like a small theater play. Like when she did the interview with Howard Stern, she got an offer. We took it immediately, because it was just like people wanting to act with her. She's like, they just want to do that. Oh, I love it. That's exactly it. And so I think she would have been an actress, as she was an actor, I should say. And I think she would have been a great one and continued to do that, even if it would have been at dinner theaters or small theaters I'm not saying she would be famous again, but I think she would have explored the life of, I like to act.
And she gets to be a mom.
Yeah.
That's her leading role.
Yeah.
I think that she would have been the only one to determine if that was right for her. And it really is very disappointing in people when you see so many people say, well, she was a beloved child star. She was not an addict, or she didn't do this. And they're so vehement about it in a very odd way that they're actually speaking for her. And I think that that's far more exploitive than the truth. And, they didn't really care what she wanted in life.
Right. They cared about what they wanted her to be.
Yes.
What their interpretation of it was. They
fetishized her.
Yeah. That's a weird one, isn't it? Like, people thrust their interpretation of art or the artist on the art and artist, and the art or artist never is able to, well, I shouldn't say never, but is compromised by one person with the big mouth's interpretation of it. It compromises the integrity of art to force this interpretation. Like, she never did that and all this. Like, how, please quit wrecking the integrity of this art or artist. Be skeptical. You can't say that. You can, like, they should be phrasing it differently at the least, but they don't. You're right. They're very adamant about what they know and what they don't know, even though they don't know.
Right. They just want her to be a doll on the shelf.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And she definitely had all of the struggles that I've read about in the Me Too movement and have come to light, even though I've paid attention. That's a heavy movement. And she definitely was a person who explained a lot of that, tried to explain a lot of that stuff to me early on. So I think when you talk about her having counseling, she would have been a really cool role model. I think she would have grown into a really great artist. And like you said, doing art for art's sake and raising her child for her heart, like she would have been filling her heart versus other people's expectations and having to be a meal ticket for her fiance or other things. Yes, I think she would have done a lot of heart-filled things.
Her being a child actress from the 70s, I can't help but imagine she probably endured a lot of abuses that most female actresses unfortunately speak up about, like you're saying, very similar to the Me Too movement. And I'm thinking of how that's, 30, 40 years ago. You can't be surprised that someone would feel so troubled, feel invisible, feel lost, maybe just want to be a parent. And because a lot of times it's like a inverted version of, the mothers who put their children into acting or pageants to vicariously enjoy something they didn't have. It's sort of a flip of that. Perhaps she wanted to be a mom to have a hard reset on her life. Experience life just as a kid because she didn't get that.
Oh, I love that. Yeah, well, she certainly did tell me some things as we recorded that were like, the idea is like she had succumbed to some abuses when she was younger, and then she said no more. And she was basically blackballed. Once she wouldn't lay on the couch anymore, the casting couch, she didn't get work anymore. So she was this strong woman who was like, no more. She wouldn't take it. She was like, this is wrong. And she suffered for that. And that's really sucks.
It's quite sad that she doesn't get brought up in this as if it's somewhat new, unless you're, Meryl Streep or someone who's incredibly high profile. It's another display of class and privilege even within elites.
Oh, yeah. Dana Plato is, like I don't know if she's an outlier or invisible, how you would determine that, but
she got shunned. She got kicked out of the nest.
She did. And her story is horribly tragic. That's why I wonder if it's ignored. If that's why it's so ignored, because her story is a hard story to tell.
I think especially when her death was so recent, it was hard for people to just accept it or let it exist because they just wanted things their way. They didn't want to fetishize it as death, but rather have this ideal image. I think it's interesting now people really prey upon death today in 2019. Look, when someone dies, how large their memorials are, or how we have to have a whole week of mourning on the internet someone that we didn't even know, but our dad had a lot of their albums. Something like that. And I'm not trying to shut up on anyone's death or anyone this isn't a dog whistle to anything in particular. This is just in general. If I had to be specific, I do think of Prince and David Bowie's deaths, how yes, it's terrible they died, of course, but they're also human beings. And you can't be like, No, they died when you didn't give a shit that David Bowie secretly had cancer. You didn't care that he was in pain. You didn't care about David Bowie as a man. You imagined him having a unicorn cock or whatever. You didn't care about his life.
That's funny. Well, the unicorn cock is funny. The rest is not. That's so true. But, now I don't know. I think I've told you either on record or not, but I spent my summers at a funeral home.
Yes. And
I got to learn a lot about how people dealt with that. Now, most people at a funeral are sad because of their mortality, not because of the person in the box. The front line is concerned, like the mom, the wife, all these things. They're like devastated. And you can see in their face, everything. They're crying. They're devastated. Like, what will I do Monday when this funeral's over? This is it for me. Then the other people are like sad that they're going to die someday. And that's what I see when people are like, celebrities are like worshipped online when they die. It's like, that motherfucker was 89 years old. Like, why aren't you just admitting, like, I'm sad because I'm going to die someday? Or, wow, this person, Prince, what a great life. Not what a sad death, but what a great life. That guy's incredible. He lived like a 500-year life in, 50 years or 60, however old he was?
Yeah.
Like, holy fuck, did Prince light it up. Like, that motherfucker tore life up. Like, what a life is what I thought when he died. Like, I'm a big Prince fan. So I was like, I didn't think, what a death.
Right.
What a drug addict. What a sad, sad man. I never thought that. When I saw people saying that, I'm like, no. And I don't like it. Then they put rest in power. I'm like, no, how about they rest in peace? They lived in power. Like, I want to rest in peace, not in power.
I struggle with that phrase. I think that it had the best intention in certain places, but I think it gets overused as a virtue signal by others it wasn't written for.
I love all these new concepts like virtue signaling. Grandpa needs to understand. I understand the concept of virtue signaling slightly.
I should have a bat signal in case you virtue signal, and I should just shine it behind me, and it'll be like your silhouette as a shadow. It'll be the virtue.
Yeah, if you call me out about it, we'll have a show. I'll just start pontificating about what I said. I was virtue signaling, and I'll argue with you for about a half hour. So maybe you do need that bat. I'm a very virtuous man. How can I not signal that?
That's good. It's very interesting how parallel our podcast is to your story of meeting Dana Plato. And this is quite interesting. We're into season 3. Season 3, all of you. I bet you didn't expect us to last this long. But here we are, season 3 of Speak of the Devil with the worst witch ever. And here I am recording your life, learning a lot about you, learning things that I didn't expect to learn from you, about Chicago, generally about things that I didn't know you had a part in that are very important. And it's quite an interesting parallelism, and it kind of gives chills to my spine. So I got to ask you, when I release the book, do I put all of our podcasts on CD or do they put them on MP3 for the kids?
Boy, I get to choose. I want it on everything. I want an 8-track, vinyl, cassette, CD,
laser
blasted
disc?
into space in a big metal thing that is MP3, all of it in a big box that will not burn up through the environment, or, it goes into space. So, sunk to the bottom of the ocean for Cthulhu.
Shoots across. We think it went to space. It lands somewhere in Iowa. Someone, what the hell is that?
Yeah, I want it to be released on MP3 on in a balloon. Like, you let go of 100 balloons with the MP3 attached to the bottom of them.
Oh, like those care packages sent to North Korea?
Yes, I like that. So every format you can do. I can't wait. I hope. when you do the book, I probably won't be alive, but my ghost will be there, and I will haunt your ass.
Local ghosts fined and arrested for littering.
If you give this book
100 balloons found in tree.
if you give Nannerl's book a bad review, I'll haunt your ass. That's what I'm guaranteeing. All I'm saying with the book is watch yourself, because I'll be with that book. Each book that Nannerl puts out, the ghost of me comes with it. You get that free with every purchase.
Thank you for listening. Please subscribe and tune into our next episode wherever you prefer to listen to podcasts. You can find us at Speak of the Devil Pod on Twitter and contact us at speakofthedevilpod@gmail.com. For Shane's artwork or to support his endeavors, please visit shanebugby.com or find him on Twitter at ShaneBugby. I've been Nannerl. Have a good one.
Oh, and ShaneIsTheDevil.com.